So today I want to build something like this, where we have these cool open graph images that we can share on social media sites like LinkedIn to get a bit more engagement in the articles that you write and stand out a bit from the crowd. And my weapon of choice for this is, well, Next.js. That wouldn't be a surprise, but we're gonna go over how I did this, all the different parts of Next.js that I used for this, and actually show how indeed powerful serverless and how easy it can be for me as just a front-ender to work with this whole serverless architecture using Netlify. So that's a nice bridge as well. So the problem that I have is whenever I share articles on LinkedIn or Twitter, they look like this. They don't really pop out. I don't really have the control to, for instance, show what the date is of the article. Is it a recent one or from 2 years ago? But just generally, my visual style is not here. And I am a developer, so I'm not going to open up Photoshop and create custom thumbnails every time. But I want to have something like GitHub does. So recently, GitHub added this functionality where whenever you share a link to a pull request or to a repository, you get this neatly designed card, which shows some stateful data. So for instance, the amount of issues that you see here, but also with their entire branding, their images, titles, descriptions. And I noticed that when I saw that on LinkedIn, every time it came up, I was like, well, hey, what is that? And there are some off-the-shelf solutions for this. So for instance, Versor or Site have a solution or a paid solution to be able to generate cards like these. But yeah, where's the fun in that, right? We're developers, we have all these great tools, and I want to build something myself. This was the thought that went through my mind. Well, I could easily build this, right? As always, for every side project. Those are usually famous last words because it gets more tricky than you might think at the start, but that's how you learn. So I built this for my personal website, which is, it's sort of like a project car where I keep on every couple of months, I add something new, I work on something or refactor something, but it's basically, it's okay if it breaks down. Sometimes there's no biggie. And of course, with Netlify, I can roll back if something happens. But this is where I learned stuff by just doing it and just working with this serverless to create cool functionalities and to learn to fail often and learn often because of that. I can give a quick overview. The website, it's basically just a list of my talks. So this is today. I have some articles, my resume, and my YouTube videos. So pretty straightforward, but a lot of content. So the reason I chose Next.js for this is, well, I wanted to learn Next.js to begin with, but it offers me these great functionalities like statically generating my pages, because well, I maybe have 30 articles. Why not just render them indeed instead of doing everything client side? Just have some HTML and CSS, and that's my page. But next to that, I know that I'm going to add functionalities like, for instance, these open graph images, which I probably want an API for, and Next.js offered that for me, as well as not having to run a node server, because I'm a front-end developer, indeed, and running node servers and scaling them, I don't know how that exactly works, and I don't really want to know. But a serverless function, that's fine for me. It's a function, and I can host it on, for instance, Netlify, which hosts it on AWS for my website, and indeed not have to worry about scaling and all those things. So that offers all these great functionalities for me to be able to build virtually anything I want to. Another reason serverless is great for me, this is a live image of the active users on my website. Sure, I have some articles that are being read more often, but generally there's nobody on my website, and I don't want to pay for a server running when there's nobody there. which of course it is a USP of serverless, but that comes in really handy for me who doesn't, I'm a true Dutchman. If I don't have to pay for something, I won't. So this is great. Yeah, I wanted to learn to create my own custom serverless function instead of using Next.js. So let's build it. So I always start out with sketching my idea because I find that that works best. So the first part of my idea is to have this dynamic page in Next.js, which can receive an image, maybe a title and a date, and it should render that. So I thought about, well, maybe I can use something like Canvas, but I always find Canvas a bit tricky. But what I do know is HTML and CSS. And I have these cards already designed basically as these teaser images. So this is a familiar stack for me. It's just HTML, CSS. I can reuse a lot of my styles, my fonts. And it's, well, I don't have to explain everybody. I think that HTML, CSS is perfect for templating. So we need to have a page on my website. We need to have a URL that we can hit, and I will show you how we can do that. So I wanted to have a /OG for Open Graph /image, and then being able to pass some query variables to that page. We head over to my code. This is my portfolio website, locally checked out. For people who never really looked at Next.js before, we basically have a pages folder, which you probably made yourself during a Create React App application. And in this special folder, Next.js knows, okay, whenever there's a file like index, this is the /index.html. Whenever there's a /articles, /index, it hits on the /articles, so on and so on. So this is a perfect place to, well, make a new page. So I created a folder called Open Graph and created a file called image. So immediately Next.js makes this route for me. I don't have to worry about it, and people can hit it. In the end, this is just like any other React component, just a function that, well, there's a bar in the way of my screen, so I can't. How can I remove this? There we go. I can see again, which is just an open graph, or is just an open graph card, which is basically some HTML that has some CSS to style it and some JavaScript logic to, for instance, format the date. Then we have this page, but of course, I don't want to do everything on the client because I shouldn't have to. I just want to hit the URL. It will render a page on the server, and I will be able to use it. So there's another special thing that Next.js offers for you, which is this get server-side props. And what this function basically means is every time you hit the URL, it's first going to run this function. After that, it's going to render the page on the server side, then send back the HTML. And in the end, whenever your React bundle loads, it will hydrate the front end. So if you have a use effect or something like that, you can access it here. So what we can see here is that, well, I've access to the request and the response, or to the request rather. So I can get this query object, which holds the title, date, and image that I need. And then I can return an object with props, which will be added here, and I can get them and render my component. So that's great. Let's have a look at an example. So if I hit /open graph /image, and already prepared this link this afternoon, you can see that I have a page, which is maybe not very exciting, but it's a page I have fully under control where I can reuse all of my styling and basically make this responsive to always show a good card. That's great. So I have the page. That's step one. That was the easy step. That's why I thought this entire process would be easy, because like, I'll just create a thing and make a screenshot, which is the next step. And this is where I use a serverless function to basically start up Puppeteer, go to this page, let it render on the server. Once it comes back, we make a screenshot and we send that back. So what Jason mentioned earlier is that, for instance, you have my functions folder here. I let Netlify know, okay, these are my serverless functions. Please use this and create a serverless function on AWS Lambda, for instance. And all this does is it exports this handler, which is a function where I from the query string parameters, I get the information that I need. I'm going to generate an open graph image and then send back the JSON. Oh, sorry. In here, generate the open graph image. It is actually as simple as launching Puppeteer, going to a new browser page, setting this viewport width and height, which apparently is a very good default for open graph images. So that's why I chose them here, and I know that my page will correctly scale. Then we go to my serverless function. That's on my website. We make a screenshot, close the browser, and send it back as a base64 string. Perfect. So if I hit it, and it might be asleep, the function, but let's see how quick I can make it. Whenever I hit /API/opengraph/image, it's actually going to hit my Next.js API. And it's normally a bit quicker than this. But here's my image. It's a giant buffer. And I think if I refresh it now, it should be a lot quicker than it did before. Yeah, there it already is. So that's great. I have that step to use. And I can basically get an image because this buffer basically returns this image. So the next step, because I don't want to call the Netlify serverless function directly, I never call anything directly from my front end. I always call my own API routes sort of as a proxy. And from there, I can call external services if I want to just keep it simple on my own page. So you guessed it, there's going to be another URL, the /API/opengraph image, which will receive the title, image, and date. So to create an API in Next.js, and this is what I love about this platform, is creating a folder called API, and that's it. So in this API, we can follow the same naming pattern with folders to say /API, for instance, content, /tags, and you will basically have another function that will just get some tags and return them for you, get them from wherever. For me, it's a local markdown file, but of course it could be on a CMS or whatever you like. So that's great. So I created a folder called Open Graph, added an image in there, image.tsx. And here I have the request and the response object again. So I can get the title, date, and image. I can actually fetch this Netlify function that we previously saw, get the buffer, and again, just return it, because then I can use it wherever I want to in whatever way I want to. So yeah, we're doing this really quickly, but it's basically a folder with a file and 6 lines of code, and I have an API which is serverless, which scales, which is amazing for me as a front-end dev. So now the fun part begins. We can tie it all together. So we first made this page. We then made a serverless function to actually do a screenshot. And then we created an API route to get it. So now I want to have a page, for instance, an article page, and I want to actually use this image. So let's close this up. So in pages, for instance, for an articles page, I have a folder called articles in an index file. So this will be the overview page of all my articles with all the links in there. So again, a regular React component that I export, which expects some items and a type, because I have different type of articles with some small variations in there. And then it will render some article teasers. But here I don't use get server-side props because it doesn't really make sense. These articles hardly ever change. I mean, it's in my project checked in as a markdown file. So whenever there's a new build, it's always the latest one. And here I just wanted some HTML during build that I can serve to the user, and then load my JavaScript on the client if I need to. So what I do is, instead of get server-side props, I do get static props, which is where you can do basically the same, except this will run during the build instead of when it's live as a serverless function. So here I get some copy, some headings, and I return those props. Again, they come in here, they render this on the server side and output some HTML that we can easily serve. But what if we have 10, 15, 20 articles? Of course, I'm not going to create all of those files here because that wouldn't make sense. So if we do this fancy bracket around, for instance, slug, whatever you want it to be, Next.js knows, hey, this is dynamic. There are going to be multiple ones, and I should always hit this route. Again, this is a regular React component that gets exported, which indeed has a get static props as well, because I just want to render it during the build, where I get the actual article and then return it. There's a second function that I can export though, which is get static paths. And this is basically my way to tell Next.js, by the way, these are all the possible variants that there are. So what I do is, of course, I just get my articles and return a paths array with all the slugs. So during the build, it knows, oh, this is the array. I need to build all these pages, and we'll actually just output HTML that you can upload wherever you want to. Cool, there's a fallback here. So if by any chance there's a new page that hasn't been built yet, you can have interaction with that. I know if somebody hits a weird URL, just go to the 404. It's not my, it's not an article of mine, but this is where you can do that. Great. So we need to get an open graph image. And if we go back to the /articles, we can see I have this helper function just to make it easier, where I say, hey, I want to have an open graph images. By the way, I'm the /articles page, and here's some information, like a title and an image that I want to show there. So if I open up this function, you can see that, well, I check if I'm in development. I don't want to bother with all these generation of images because I'm not going to look at it. Just return the image if it's there, if somebody passed an image, and just leave it like that. But if it's not in development, I have this public folder, just like create React app, where I have a folder _generated. I then construct an image path. So this path is whatever I pass through. So /articles. And I'm going to say, hey, I want to check whether there's already an image, because if the resource is there, I'm not going to generate it again. Of course, I'm just going to return this path and people can use it. Something goes wrong, again, just send back the standard image that somebody wanted to put into the design. But if it's not there, we need to generate it. And this is where I have a small helper function, which is basically a fetch to /API /opengraph /image, and I add a query string to it. Well, I get a buffer back, take that buffer to string in a base64, and then I can actually write the file to my public folder. And in the end, I return the path to that file for the person using this. Cool. So if you have a sharp eye, you see that I never really use this page image here, but I still you do use it. And that's a final step here, where we have this _app file, which again is a special Next functionality, which works exactly the same as with a normal create React app where you have app. So if I open this basically wraps around each page. So this is where you load your partials, like maybe your Google Analytics. I have some animation that I need to initialize. But what I also load here is some site metadata. So maybe some favicons, some descriptions, and a special component which has all my open graph tags. So what I do here is I say, I'm going to receive that page image that somebody passed from here. Gets passed as a prop. And then I'm running through this small little helper function that will set some defaults, some sensible defaults, whenever it is an article, it will do some extra things. In the end, I end up with all these values that I can use, and I just put them in the head. So here is our open graph image, and we have the image path, so I can load it here. The same goes for Twitter. You might want to show on Twitter a nice big image. You can do that here as well. So let's see if this actually, one more slide, I think. Yeah. So this happened to me because I was like, okay, cool. It's all put together. I see it working locally on my machine. It works on my machine. I can ship it and have a quiet evening. I couldn't because everything failed on Netlify for me, which was my fault. So luckily there were some small changes I needed to make, but I think it's good to share, also to be honest with whenever you fail in what you're trying to do and why and how I could solve it. So the first issue that I had with Puppeteer was a stupid one. It wasn't headless. So I tried to open on the screen and there wasn't one. Luckily, that's easy because you can say headless true. But the second one was a bit more tricky, and that's where a lot of time came in, which was the function size of a serverless function can only be a certain amount. And of course, I was loading Puppeteer, so I was loading Google Chrome with 250 megabytes or more. And yeah, that didn't fit. So Netlify told me, hey, that's not going to fit. The function size is too big, so you can't use it. Well, luckily, again, this is an easy fix if you know about it. But yeah, I was struggling quite a bit. So if we go back to the Netlify functions folder, you can see that, well, headless true, that's an easy fix indeed. But the other one was to be able to create this serverless function, to build the function, that was the word I was looking for, but not bundle the entire Chrome in there. And luckily there was this great package, as I knew that Netlify was also using AWS, which is Chrome AWS Lambda, and that took care of that, where it just gets an executable path for the Chromium instance, and I don't have to worry about it. So does it now finally work? No, it doesn't. So I kept WhatsApping a friend of mine who got really irritated at one point, but I needed to try to see whether my images and my links showed up. So what you see here is that the first 3 tries it didn't. And because my image was way too big in file size for WhatsApp, it doesn't even show the rest. So it doesn't show my title, it doesn't show my description and the link. It just completely blanks it out. And of course, I do want to have this working. So I looked into it and turned out that these open graph images were sometimes 600 kilobytes, which is a lot for this simple image. But what I saw is that I used PNG instead of JPEG. So that's a good thing to look at, because basically PNG had more difficulties with the high fidelity photo and the gradient that I put over it. So it made these super large files. So I flipped it to JPEG, which should be way better in handling that. And I think I went from 600 kilobytes to 80 kilobytes or something like that. So that's when I shared this link and it actually showed up. So that's great. So now it actually all works. And whenever I share an article now on, for instance, LinkedIn, you see this nice bright orange and red image pop out where I have the control of adding the date. And I said stateful, of course I can add that if I want to. So a couple of points. Serverless, well, as you saw, it is easy because we have these great tools like Next.js, these great platforms like Netlify to help us and just say, hey, here is a function that you can use in JavaScript. But for me, it's also really cheap because, yeah, I don't have a node server running all the time. And again, with Netlify, I could host this for free. So I never pay a single euro yet. Well, I hope I get into that problem where there's too much traffic. But for now, it's free for me, which is great, of course. And I know it's super powerful because indeed it will scale, and AWS will handle that for me. What I also saw is that this is so perfect for these isolated functions. So whenever I'm sick and tired of Next.js and I want to go to something else, I can still use this serverless function that I have. So it's this neat little bundle, little function that I can host anywhere and take advantage of. So don't be intimidated by serverless. I think the first time I heard about serverless, I was like, oh, I don't know, I'm a front ender, I don't want to think about all of that. But if you get to work with these type of things, you can see that, well, it's basically just a function, and there are so many great toolings out there. Great. So I was building this and I was preparing this talk, and at the same time, GitHub released an article, and in that article they basically explain how they did it, which was super fun, of course, because I had no idea how they actually did it, and I was curious whether they took the same route, and I wasn't doing it in a weird way. And turned out they do exactly the same thing, maybe not with Next.js, but they also just render that page, get up there, make a screenshot. But of course, my website just has a few pages. They have to run this millions of times to create all these images. So they go really in depth into, okay, how can I improve the performance, some caching strategies, but also how can I make the screenshot process quicker? Because for me, it takes quite a while, which is okay because it's not this gigantic corporation. It's my website where I just place my articles. But the great thing about Next.js, again, and this ties in a bit, I think, with Jason, where he said precompile it. So all these article pages, because I said use static site generation for it, it does all of this during the build. So in production, it will never really have to hit it. It could. I mean, the function is there. I could hit it, but it doesn't have to. So all my pages that are pre-rendered have created these image assets, and they can be cached however you want to. So I have some final thoughts. And I encourage you, and that's also a big part why I wanted to share this, is for everybody to have this project card, to have this continuous project, to just try out stuff. And during building this, my website went down 6-7 times. It doesn't really matter. Luckily, it's my website. I'm not doing this, of course, at a client working on a big project. But it helps me to keep me up to date, try out all these new technologies whenever I see a talk about, for instance, serverless, like, oh, okay, I have an environment where I can try some stuff out. So that's great as a portfolio and to share it in these type of talks. I like to not use an off-the-shelf solution. Of course, sometimes it's quicker, but what I really like is to see, okay, how would I do this? Can I do this? And what will I run into? And from this journey, I already had quite a few points which I could use in my actual day job project. I was like, hey, I ran into that one when I was building this open graph image. You can fix it like this. So that's great for that. And it's incredibly fun, of course, to do it. And to use your super awesome dev powers. So we have all these great platforms like Netlify and like Next, Puppeteer, for instance. All this great tooling, and we just need to tie them together and make cool things. And I think, that's for me very important in my job, to also sometimes just make cool things. Finally, I could end up from a how would I do that to actually finding it out, making it, and sharing it with a bunch of people, and that's for me a great moment. Thank you.
Every time I get unmuted, I have to click 2 or 3 buttons to try and get my my camera and mic.
Very hidden.
Thank you so much for the talk. Really cool. Apparently my camera's decided to unfocus me as well now. Very cool talk. Thanks a lot. I also agree with that, having continuous projects and just kind of experimenting and see what you can do as a solo developer. Because a lot of the time, especially for us as consultants, we get put in a team and you can do what you need to do, but when you have to do everything yourself, can you actually get that working, and are you flexible enough to be able to solve all of the solutions for the task at hand, which is always fun to figure out. Yeah, I really appreciate the talk. That was pretty fun. And I don't know, I don't see, oh, there actually is a question. Okay. So I was going to say I didn't see any questions, but I just saw one pop up. So I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Sib Vartner asked, it's cool that you switched from PNG to JPEG. Have you thought about how to further optimize the file size in your setup?
Yes, so I thought about this a bit. So a big change that I could make is minifying those images, because I still think there's a lot to win there, because still 80 kilobytes for this image, I think it could be way less. So I could either during my build add that, but I do know, and I'm not completely sure, but I think I hit this check mark on Netlify, which says optimize my assets. So I'm curious whether that also makes it all a bit smaller. I could check it, but that would be a big performance gain, I think, to do that.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, there's a few more questions actually. One of the questions that we have is, what are good resources to get started with something like this?
Sorry?
Yeah.
Sorry, I was also reading the chat.
Oh, no problem, no problem. I'm not sure if there's anything in the chat that I missed, actually. Sorry, I wasn't focusing on the launching an instance of a since cold start is long. Okay, I'm not sure what that's in regards to, but sorry, the other question I was asking was, what are good resources to get started on a project like this? For instance, how did you actually decide to solve this? What were your reasons behind going for Next and going for the AWS Puppeteer? Because there are other libraries for solving the same solution.
It's
sorry.
5:15, so that's
there are other libraries for solving the same thing that Puppeteer does, right? So
yes,
what was your reasons for going with these specific ones?
For Next.js, I think 3 or 4 years ago, it was the whole Gatsby is something new and Next.js is something new, and which one should we use? And I heard a lot about Gatsby, and then I tried to run it, and that was back then, and maybe it was my fault, but I just tried to run the simple README. Everything failed. I got errors and all these packages and weirdness. I was like, okay, and I'm sure that maybe it's a bit my fault somewhere. I was like, no, I just want to use your README and run it. And then I run Next.js, and I was like, hey, I have React DOM, and Next. That's it. I could start. So for me, it's usually, okay, how simple is this library? Do I need all these weird things, or can I just keep it simple like that? But regarding Puppeteer, that's what I'm used to. So it was, okay, which one do I know? Which tool? Well, it's Puppeteer. Okay, I'm just going to use that, and it will work. But I'm interested to see also with the screenshots and stuff, what would happen if I just run something else and try to make screenshots and see if that's indeed quicker with the boot time of Puppeteer itself or the browser then, but also the file size.
Yeah, and I assume there's caching also involved in this. So if you call the same endpoint multiple times, it should be a lot quicker than if you calling different endpoints for different articles where different screenshots need to be generated.
Yeah, exactly, and and the images are there as resources. So yeah, I will return just that path when it's there, which is an image which could be cached like anything else.
Yeah. Okay. One question in Zoom chat. Okay. What dimensions do you use for the images? Do you code the layouts with a fixed size or responsive? That's actually an interesting.
Yes, yeah. So I basically just Googled what image should an Open Graph image be, and I know indeed that there are quite a few. To keep this simple, because I don't want to figure out which website is loading me to make it even more difficult. I just said, okay, what's the sort of a golden standard, which should you use? Which was, let me see, because I have the code open, which was a width of 1200 and a height of 630. So basically 2 by 1. And I found that worked really well. It doesn't work well on WhatsApp because it's this tiny little square, which is very annoying. But there's a simple trick in that, and that's making sure that you have some cutoff space of the image itself. So I have some margins around the actual content. So I know if it's a bit tighter or a bit less tall, it will still be fine. It will still be viewable.